everyone. I hope you're keeping well. Thank you for joining me for a very special 10th anniversary of White Dwarf issue. Yes, we are witnessing the next step in the evolution of White Dwarf magazine. You'll already have spotted some changes. We're going to take a closer look at what they are in our next of the Decades of Dwarf series. So let's dive on in. Now, today's video is brought to you, as always, from my painting table, which at the moment is covered in little bits and paints from painting up some Skeleton Warriors for a game at Boyle. More on those later, I'm sure. But for now, let's take a look at our 2 issues of White Dwarf. Looking a lot more similar, you might think, than last month's and every previous month's comparison editions, because we are no longer in A4 stapled format here. Now we have moved, now this is a thicker White Dwarf, we have moved to glued spines, perfect bound spines. Well, not perfect because they tend to come apart, but you know what I mean by perfect bound, right? That's the technical term for it. Yes, glued spines. As you can see, the 1980s White Dwarf still a little bit bigger, a little bit wider than the 90s White Dwarf, not quite at the same format, but looking very much more similar than the previous editions. This being White Dwarf issue 90, 10 years of White Dwarf, 1977 till 1987, and obviously looking very different to the 1977 editions. The cover here, a John Civic piece, a John Civic commissioned Games Workshop piece, so an official piece of Games Workshop artwork, as the last issue was, but from now on we're going to be seeing a lot more Games Workshop art on the cover and a lot less of the licensed images that have previously been on the cover. And some might say that that's a good thing, some might say that that's a bit of a loss, but it definitely marks this move of White Dwarf firmly moving towards a Games Workshop in-house, Games Workshop product only magazine. This is a John Civic painting, and you might recognise him as the dwarf from Hero Quest. This is actually 2 years before the release of Hero Quest, so he was obviously an influence on the miniature for the game and not the other way around. But we will be seeing a miniature of this chap pop up throughout the pages here. So what have we got to mark 10 years of White Dwarf then? Well, let's take a look. Ravening Hordes, we saw that last issue. The War Games army lists for Warhammer. A review of the Power Barons board game from Milton Bradley. Not getting board game reviews very often in White Dwarf these days, but there you go. All in all, I found the game initially attractive because of the out-and-out grossness of the components, and in play rather disappointing. Expecting something like Dallas didn't prepare me for what was an abstract and rather simplistic game, which didn't deserve quite such a lavish production job. They make everything bigger in the US. Well, yes, not a glowing review from Mark Gascoigne there. Terra Australis, the Australian supplement for Call of Cthulhu, having had the English one recently. And the Shattered Isle, a supplement for Stormbringer and Hawkmoon. Still got a few more slightly more obscure games on the review here. Wizard's Revenge, Between Two Suns, Pinnacle and Crystal Barrier. A discussion of what might or might not be coming up in the future of Games Workshop. Slaughter Margin, supplement for Judge Dredd the role-playing game. Lovely new Citadel miniatures. What have we got? We've got some skeletons, some goblins, some orcs, including the leader with sword here. It's a bit of a shame that they haven't got names. After all, the limited edition Up the Wall crew, they've got names. The Road Trooper guys obviously have got names. The barbarians here have got cool names. The Norse dwarfs, apart from the casualty, have got names. But the skeletons, the goblins have names, but the skeletons and orcs, sadly, do not have. Maybe the catalogue composers had run out of inspiration by this point. But yes, some classic old school orcs. There, as I mentioned, the limited edition Up the Wall crew are out in this edition. Chaos Dwarf Petard and the Imperial Dwarf Bolt Thrower. Barbarians, Norse Dwarfs, metal shields. More than you would ever know. Designs of these metal shields are apparently available. Along with arcane armorials for those people still using the plastic shields and who want Ali Morrison's designs. I used to have a few sheets of these and I looked at the sheets and I thought they're ridiculous garish. Don't really like the colours on those. So I think I gave them away or sold them or some such thing. But actually on shields, they don't look too bad as long as you choose them wisely and then I guess put an ink wash over them to dull them down a bit. But yeah, I did think from the sheets that they looked rather bright and garish. But some of these designs, like this tree design here, I don't know if I can see any more on this sheet. Maybe this one with the crossed hammer and axe. There were definitely quite a few on these sheets that ended up being all the other way around, were taken from the designs of these metal shields. Thread the Barbarian is marking the White Dwarf anniversary with a barbarianogram and a full page. Having mentioned the English supplement for Call of Cthulhu, here is a way of getting your English characters in Call of Cthulhu to speak appropriately. And of course, it's all very West Country. It's all very, inverted commas, farmery. Mummerset, a regional dialect used by authors who can't be bothered to research the correct vocabulary for the area in question. Yes, so all you American games masters who know nothing about England, everyone who is a yokel or in any way country and a bit simple speaks with a very faux broad West Country Devonshire / Somerset accent. But there are some alternatives here. If you want to be Scottish, you add ochai, hoots, mon, and the new, and use a slightly high-pitched voice. Irish variants add begorra and Saints preserve us, and the Welsh say a lot of boyo and look you, which is not true. They don't, but I guess it's one of those things. As I spent a little bit of time, not very much time, as a kid doing acting bits and pieces before I moved into stage management and then design. And the accent coaches would often say that what you need to get into an accent is a phrase that you can pronounce reliably, and if you say that, it helps you to get into the frame. And some of these are like look you. That's a good Welsh interjection that you can stick in the middle of a phrase. So if you find that you're losing your accent and you just stick that in, it helps regain it. So I guess maybe there's a use to some of these things, but they are extremely cliche. And there is some regional slang terms in here, some of which is Cockney, some of which is very English, like egg, a person, normally a good egg or a bad egg. There's kibosh, spoil ruin, let's put the kibosh on it. Sling the bat, speak the foreign language. Strike a light, expression of surprise. So some of these are very cross-cultural between different regions, but they've just slung them all into one English. Along with, here's some translation of some mum said, it be warm weather, I'd like you to buy me a drink. Ask what I seed, as I know of, literally that I saw. Come Michaelmas fortnight, next Sunday. Gaffer, boss, gammer, grandmother. He be a foreigner, sorry, can't pronounce it. He's from Guildford, London, Scotland, France, Relay, Mars. He not from these parts, see, he be a foreigner. I being deaf. I am deaf and or senile, but I won't admit it. And other highly offensive takes on the English language. There is the White Dwarf special figure. I saw somebody on Facebook just yesterday trying to sell one of these for £35. He did actually enter into the Norse Dwarfs range a bit later on, so he was not strictly speaking just a limited figure for this period, but he was sculpted and released, sculpted by the Perry twins, to match the cover painting by John Sibbick, and then later used as the basis, of course, for the Hero Quest Dwarf. Feudal cavalry and fighters there in glorious multicolour. Ian Livingston discusses the early days of Games Workshop. Interesting, kind of comparing what he's saying here to his account in Dice Men, this being a lot closer to the events than Dice Men. This also being a much briefer account, so I guess there's only so much that he could fit in and discuss. But there are some similarities, and there are some differences, particularly in chronology, and I would be interested to know whether that's because this was a bit closer to the event, or whether it's because he was abbreviating for the sake of space. Here's Harbos Orc Archers, a reinvention of Harbos Black Mountain Boys, the previous regiment of renown. This time they have grabbed bows and gone further afield to wreak havoc. The Megard Scrolls, Ramblings on Jacobears, these sort of pumpkin-headed bear-type creatures in RuneQuest. A few... there is a bit of, obviously, rules in here, but this is mostly kind of legends and things surrounding the Jacobear presented from the perspective of quotes from particular characters. So things that if you asked a local, or you asked a learned professor or something about the creature, the kind of things that they might tell you, which is an interesting way of looking at defining a creature. Fear and Ignorance. This talks about ways of running a paranoia game, and paranoia obviously not necessarily being the most straightforward of games to run, walking that delicate line between killing off all your players and letting them off scot-free, both of which don't lead to a particularly entertaining game of paranoia. Here's how to strike a fair balance between them. One of Nick Bibby's glorious Great Imperial Dragons there. Gobbledygook, taking an explore through the bowels of the Games Workshop design studio. A look at career guidance in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So we've already had an article on how the career system works, but this is a bit of a look for players and GMs about how to more realistically manage, or realistically, I use in inverted commas, roleplay realistically, manage a career switch in game, so that it's not just a jarring learned new set of skills. There's actually some storyline and narrative that comes with it, along with an example tutor here. A map of the city centre of Nottingham, so you can get to the Golden Demon Awards. This is an AD&D mini-adventure set in a city for a party of 4 to 8 player characters or mixed classes of levels 4 to 7, but actually feels very much like a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay adventure, and I don't think that that's just because of Stephen Tappin's illustrations. The whole sort of urban environment, explorative, inquisitive side of this feels very much like a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. There's not too many fights to get into unless you're really dedicated to it. This explores the doings of a merchant guild who appear to be at each other's throats over the sale of counterfeit silks. very high quality silks that have the unfortunate habit of disappearing a day or two after their owners have bought them and sold them on. So the Merchant Guild understandably is up in arms, and everyone's blaming each other, and it's down to the players as adventurers to find out what's actually been going on and deal with it without arousing the attentions of the Town Watch, who are not welcome prying into guild business, of course. Here is a look at playing as perps in Judge Dredd the role-playing game. If you're bored of playing judges, and as this article attests, it can get a bit samey playing as a judge. There's a whole new set of challenges to playing as a perp, and those are covered within these pages. Then we've got to look at those arcane armorials, those Ali Morrison transfers on the shields of these various nicely painted figures. John Blanche, is this the first discussion in White Dwarf of how to apply a water slide transfer? Not sure, but I imagine, given the hype around arcane armorials, they probably are the first water slide transfers. But I don't know if there was a discussion of other brands of water slide transfer previously. Maybe you know. But as far as I'm aware, the first discussion in White Dwarf of the application of water slide transfers and how to use them. Then we have a couple of articles running simultaneously on female personas and female players in role-playing games. Not a new subject, one that Games Workshop has covered in White Dwarf a number of times over the years, and a firm fixture of the letters page during that time. But here are a couple of actual articles. The first one discussing sort of motives for female characters, reasons why female characters might be adventuring or might be playing a part. This one I feel is a little bit stereotyped. I don't know that it really helps the cause of female characters, because it doesn't acknowledge that anything that can motivate a male character can also motivate a female character. There's not that much distinction, but I guess maybe if people are looking for a reason and they haven't really thought about it, then that's a positive step. This one, A Monstrous Regiment down here, charting so-called historical instances of females in combat, in fighting roles, which we know from archaeology and so forth a lot more about now than they did in 1987. But yes, so both nobly aimed, and both by female contributors. Here we have a look at Peter Jones's illustration for the cover of Stormbringer, which is interesting to me because I'm planning on running some Stormbringer in the very near future. So I've been reading through that. It's not a cover that I particularly like. There are bits of it that are quite cool, like I like the tiger's head here. I can't work out where his arms are going. This pose looks really odd. The composition feels really strange, but and the horse's head looks weird. That doesn't look like a horse, but then it's a Melnibonian steed, so maybe it's not supposed to look like a horse. I don't know. Anyway, never mind. It's a striking cover, of course. Yeah, it's not one of my favourites. The lay of the land here. Last issue we were looking at the Robin Hood game that involved stone circles and so forth. So this is a bit of an elaboration upon that. It's not setting specific, so this is just a general sort of overview of ancient sites like stone circles, standing stones, barrow mounds, and ley lines, although they don't mean the kind of hippie ley line in this sense. They mean actual ley lines, which are a different entity as described in this article. And it's interesting timing, because I'm writing stuff about ancient monuments for the woods at the moment. So there's nothing in here that I hadn't got from far more academic study of ancient monuments. I have extensive history of reading and watching lectures and things about ancient monuments, so I'm fairly well clued up, so none of this was new to me, but it's just interesting to go back over stuff and see the way that, oh, this is what, 87, so almost 40 years ago, the way that they were looking at ancient monuments in role-playing games, especially as the feel of 80s role-playing games is very much the kind of feel that I'm going for the woods. So it's interesting to see how stuff was interpreted along those lines. There is that Stormbringer. We'll look at some of the colour plates in the book. We've covered Anywen previously. Adventure outlines for Judge Dredd, the role-playing game. So some ideas if you're playing as a judge is getting tedious, but you don't want to play as a perp. Here are some ideas for what you might do. Here's the letters page. Everyone wishing happy birthday to White Dwarf. There we go. And then we reach the back of the magazine. So there is our big chunky 10th anniversary edition of White Dwarf. Let's move to 5 years later. This is 1992. Obviously, we've got White Dwarf. Sorry, what was White Dwarf? We've got Games Workshop artwork on the cover. We've gained a barcode. We've shrunk slightly in size. But our White Dwarf character here, our White Dwarf logo, no longer the silhouette of the previous White Dwarf miniature, but now the image of John Sibbick's White Dwarf from the previous cover. Okay, this being the cover of the Chaos boxed set for 4th edition Warhammer. It's another really confusing cover image to me. I know, like, Chaos has kind of mechanisms. There's things like the Juggernaut of Khorne that I never thought was a particularly wonderful model. But putting this big, it's almost like a Gargant or a some kind of war engine from Epic, which was obviously big in White Dwarf at the time. So this felt very much more like a kind of epic sci-fi image than it felt like, you know, it's got a cannon that's blasting here and it's some kind of demon engine for sure. And yet you've got medieval looking, well, not really medieval technology knights in the, I just found it a very confusing and strange cover. And I think we're still some way off the release of that Chaos box set, so it obviously was in process for quite some time, as the 4th edition rules have not quite been released for Warhammer yet. We are still in the realm of 3rd edition, edition 3.5 if you like, with the release of the new artillery rules and the Empire armies. Here are some pictures of the 5th International Citadel Miniatures Painting Championships. As you can see, lots of games on being played, not just pretty figures in cabinets, but this is very much the second games day. So the alternated games day and Golden Demon finals run twice per year. So haven't yet rolled everything into one. There's John Blanche looking very regal in his biker outfit there, and a very odd looking early Space Marine cosplay, Terminator cosplay, but yeah, really weird looking. I find all Space Marine cosplays to look really weird because the human body doesn't do what a Space Marine does. So I think if you want to convincingly cosplay as a Space Marine, you really got to put a lot more mechanisms in your suit than most people do. I do have plans. I know how I would go about it, but I haven't really the space for a suit of Terminator armor. Here are some alternative Warhammer 40,000 close combat rules. So this is aimed at speeding up close combat, making it a bit more deadly for Rogue Trader. Not the rules that ended up going into 2nd edition exactly, but with the things like the parry rule and the fumble rule, follow-up modifiers for multiple combats, very much the precursor to what would become the Necromunda close combat rules. So not absolutely removed. You're still based off comparing weapon skill and strength and toughness for wounding and things, but instead of rolling on a table, you're just rolling and adding your weapon skill and seeing who gets the highest. So it's much better for combats where you have kind of matched people on either side, where there's only a point or two of difference either side, or they're exactly the same, as of course they are in a lot of Necromunda, because everyone's got human stats. You haven't got Orcs or Eldar, or at least not in the core set. You haven't. They did come along later on, but not in the core set. This is one of Trish's Marauder Treemen, and some Undead Carrion. These, they always confuse me a little bit. Are they supposed to be very high up in the sky and therefore very small, or are they just very small wraiths? I don't know. Because if they're supposed to be high up in the sky and very small, the perspective is inverted, because the players are going to be much closer to them than they are to the things on the ground. A very, very confusing thing. But cool models. Here are some hand-to-hand weapons for various factions in 40k to follow up that close combat article. I guess adding in stuff that was invented after the Rogue Trader rulebook came out in the first place. The Halfling Hot Pot for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, one of the best siege weapons ever invented, along with the origin story. More Empire stuff being painted, of course. Some of John Blanche's Space Marines here in their very luminous armour. I imagine, well, maybe not actually. I was going to say I imagine Chaos Space Marines, but they don't look. They look riotous rather than chaotic. So maybe they're Star Bastards rather than Chaos Space Marines. And here are some of John's illustrations from the era. The water slide transfers here, not quite so garish as the Arcane Armorials, but nevertheless ever present. Here is a adventure for Advanced Hero Quest. We haven't seen an Advanced Hero Quest adventure for a little while in the pages of White Dwarf. Well, now we have got one. It includes this figure, who I don't know where he is. I had him on my painting table at the moment because I'm painting him up for a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay character. Anyway, he's on my painting table at the moment. He's just come off my painting table, being one of the models from the Warriors Combat Cards set. And here are a couple of dungeon setups. 3 dungeon setups, in fact, for that adventure. So clearly a fairly long-winded trek, that one. Epic Orc vehicles continued. These ones, whilst the last ones were all kind of variations on the battle wagon, these are a bit more varied. The Scorcher, the Squigoth, the War Track, the Hot Splat Gun. And there are some of those Orky vehicles. Of course, several of these then made it into 40k. So we did get War Tracks, we did get Scorchers, we did get Squigoths. Remember the Squigoth that Forge World released? It was a very early Forge World resin model. One of the few Forge World models that I've ever actually wanted. But of course, as expensive as Forge World models were back in the day, I was not getting one of those. Certainly no time soon. Mechboy Pulsar Rocket, again, present in 40k. The Squig Catapult. Don't remember. Don't think we've got a Squig Catapult in 40k. Here are some of those demon princes and greater demons from last issue painted up, with an account of the going about of painting those things. And then catalogue pages. Didn't have any of those quite yet in the 70s, just the Marauder advertisements. But here we have got those Orc War Machines, Halflings, Empire, so that you can order yours from mail order, along with anything else that Games Workshop had ever sold at that time. Assuming that you didn't order plastics and they weren't out of plastics, you probably couldn't order those, but any of the metal things anyway. So there we go, and there's an Orc and Squat battle for Epic on the back cover. So, starting to look more similar, but still some differences 5 years apart. Join us next week to find out what another 5 years will do. See you then.